To understand what makes the Highland Titles Nature Reserve so popular with tourists, you have to know a little bit about Scottish law. Scottish law specifically defines a souvenir plot of land as one which is so small that it is unlikely to be wanted except for the sake of ownership, sentimental reasons, or commemorative purposes. As a result, Highland Titles is able to sell gift-sized plots of land from as little as 1 square foot. It uses the profits to manage the land as a nature reserve. It's a unique method of crowdfunding conservation. According to TripAdvisor, it's now the most popular nature reserve in Scotland. Hundreds of thousands of people have bought the gift. Tens of thousands have visited their plot of land, mostly from overseas. With volunteers on hand to help you find your plot, bird hides, beehives, habitat boxes, beautiful walks and stunning views. It's much more than a gift. It's an experience like no other.
It must be about 13 years now since we started. If we started today, everybody would understand it. Everybody would know what we were talking about because it would be called crowdfunding. But 13 years ago, nobody knew what we were about, and to be honest, I don't think many understood it. But basically, it was a unique conservation project where we bought tired old land and started to repair the damage, the historical damage, be it felling, be it commercial planting, be it intensive farming. And to fund that, we don't go to the government, we don't go to the lottery, we sell little square foot plots of land, and the revenue that generates we use to do the work we do.
Highland Titles does two things. What it does in Scotland is to conserve land. It sells it to thousands of people and means that it can no longer be sold again for housing, for a road widening scheme, for whatever. It would be very difficult to sell this land now that it's in the ownership of thousands of people, tens of thousands of people. So that's what Highland Titles does in Scotland. Highland Titles sells a dream to the people who are supporting it. The dream of actually owning a little piece of Scotland, being the lord of a small estate. We sell the land without the expenses and the process that you would have to expend to buy a larger piece of land. So anybody around the world can become a laird of Glencoe and own a little piece of Scotland. And they can come and visit it, and they can be part of the community, the clan of Glencoe, and take part in conserving this land with us. The whole of Tulloch Farm had been overrun by sheep. Farmers were getting good grants for sheep, and the more sheep they had, the more grant they had, so they were overgrazing. And not only were the Tulloch sheep, but along the River Speen there were sheep that had come from neighbours or escaped. They were feral sheep, and any tree that tried to grow was just immediately nibbled off. So because we were being given as many trees as we wanted by our wonderful neighbour Ian Gillis, who was he used to come back with sacks full of trees and say, do you want 1,000 larch? Yeah, we'd love 1,000 larch. So, we planted this strip, we planted various woods, about 10 woods around the place where there wasn't actually any agriculture taking place. And we were talking about this as a family, and Laura said, well, if we sold off some of this land, then we could buy somewhere else. Cracking idea, interesting idea. at the time I thought stupid idea, to take a wood like this one, carve it up into 1 square foot souvenir plots and sell it to people who wanted to buy a souvenir plot in Scotland. And I knew that there were such schemes because I'd already got a square foot of Islay through courtesy of Lefroy Whisky. And I knew that Manfred Mann's Earth Band had split up a field in Wales and given away a square foot to people who bought their album. And I knew that Greenpeace had split up a piece of land at the end of one of the Heathrow runways to try and stop it being sold for development. So I knew it was possible. But people bought plots, people came to see their plots, and within a year we had enough money squirreled away that we could seriously contemplate the idea of buying another piece of land. And we had a piece offered to us by a friend who lived over near Glencoe. So yeah, we had some success here in the first year. We still get a few people every year who express an interest in coming to see their square foot, which is rather nice, as opposed to the 10,000 people a year who come and see their plot in Glencoe. So we encourage people to return their plot here, and we give them a free plot in Glencoe because that's just a much better experience, and that's where we're doing all the work. We don't need to improve this. I mean, this is beautiful. You know, these birch trees are the right trees. You know, there's a lot of aspen in there that we've planted, but the birch along here, the willow along the watercourse here, it's all just natural regeneration. You know, if you stop grazing this land, it just reverts to forest. This whole glen would have been wooded, mainly oak, but with birch and willow and aspen and alder and, you know, other trees as well. But when we bought the land, it was unvisited. It was not attractive. It was hard to access because there were absolutely no tracks. There had been tracks going back. If you looked at the old Ordnance Survey maps, there used to be a couple of tracks. But there was still the Land Rover tracks from when the trees were planted, I suppose, but they were not friendly. They were not nice to walk on. You needed Wellington boots and you could easily twist an ankle. So it was inaccessible, and a piece of land that's inaccessible is, well, it's not a thing of beauty. There was a lot of bracken, and we've done our best to mitigate the bracken problem with domestic pigs that trample the bracken and root it around, and for many years the bracken is gone and trees can get a foothold in the disturbed land. So that's helped a lot. Land that isn't managed is not necessarily good wild land. It might be eventually after 1,000 years, but to begin with, it just becomes rank. You know, this was farmland, areas of it were forested, and the bits of farmland that weren't forested weren't really doing much good from a wildlife point of view.
So my initial stint with Highland Titles was actually planned to be for 4 weeks. That was all they asked me to volunteer for. And really, it was to find out if anybody visited or how many people visited. And in my first couple of weeks, sitting in my car in a lay-by beside the main road, I think it's fair to say it wasn't a roaring success. I think I saw maybe 2 people. But then it started to get busier, and initially I couldn't understand why. And that's probably because I didn't give Peter, our director, the full benefit of just how entrepreneurial and sneaky he is. He actually took a picture of me in my kilt from my Facebook page and posted it on the main Highland Titles website with a big banner that said, "Visit in August, free guided tour." And suddenly my very quiet first 2 weeks started to get busier and busier, and my 4-week stint just kept on going, and here we are 6 years later, with a tally last year of almost 10,000 visitors. So the growth has been huge. The popularity has grown. Our TripAdvisor reviews, our Facebook reviews, our Trustpilot reviews are staggering. I met a lovely couple from America last week whom I sadly didn't recognise, but they turned out to be my very first tour, which took me back about just over 6 years ago, and they were astounded at how much had changed, how much we had actually achieved in those 6 years. And it kind of made me think and reflect on just what we have done. When I joined, I sat in my car in a little lay-by at the end of the road. We now have a driveway in. We have our third version of the car park because we have to keep making it bigger. We have a reception hut in the car park where you can have a cup of tea and a coffee, where you can get a map printed out of where your plot is on the reserve. But there's so much more than these little administrative things. This, for example, is one of 2 beautiful loch-ins that we've built. Depending just how good Mark's camera is, you'll see the dragonflies swooping along the top of the water. If you're lucky, you'll see one of our wild brown trout jump and take one. Because after we built it, after it all settled and started to mature, we stocked it with wild brown trout, and that was the trigger for so many new species to actually make this their home. Otters, the dragonflies, just so much. But obviously it was also the catalyst for the osprey, which has just been amazing. So yeah, it has to be probably the biggest species change. Although red squirrels are endangered, it's wonderful to have them back as well. Conservation or restoration is still the basis of everything we do. So there's quite large areas of Keel Hill that we have already replanted. There's about 9,000 trees now in place. It's fair to say, though, that the biggest volume of work will be when we take out the Sitka spruce, restore the soil, repair the damage of commercial planting, and then continue with replanting. The trees that we plant are from quite an extensive choice, really, because we will plant anything that used to grow here. Up to and including the beautiful Scots pine, which is the only native pine tree, and we now have a fenced area just a little further up the hill with our first batch of Scots pine now in and growing nicely. Scots pine, Scots pine, Scots pine, Scots pine, my absolute favourite tree, and yet one of the rarest in Scotland now. This is our tree nursery, one of the areas where our volunteers have really helped a lot. We've been lucky enough to have a number of graduates come and work with us, doing prey surveys, location surveys for the wildcat release. They've helped us looking after the cats, feeding, and they work with us on tree planting, and a whole range of things that it just lets us do more without running out of money, basically. It's fabulous to have the input of volunteers. It's amazing to have the knowledge that graduates bring, because I'm certainly not a graduate. In some areas we use stakes and tree covers just to stop the deer from nibbling them when they're really young. Once they're older, they can come out. There's a big debate about what it actually achieves, because of course once the tree grows to the top of the cover, the deer can still reach it, they can still eat them. So it's sometimes we plant with, sometimes we plant without. If we don't use the stake and the cover, we can plant twice as many trees because we save the expense of the biodegradable plastic. With the money we've generated from the sale of plots here, we were able to buy Mountain View, which is up at Invergarry, past Invergarry.
Loch Loyne, Bumblebee Haven, Mountain View, it's wild, it's desolate. There's nobody lives anywhere near it. It's a beautiful piece of land that's been utterly spoilt by an inappropriate planting with a non-native conifer. It used to be part of a huge pine forest. The stumps are still in the ground, bogwood. I don't know when they were cut down or when they were lost. Maybe they were burnt. Perhaps it was part of the clearances. I don't know, but the stumps are still there in the ground, and that's what it needs to be again. We need to get rid of this Sitka, which is, underneath the trees, it's barren, it's sterile. And as soon as the trees are big enough, we'll get them taken out and get them replanted. So that is our project. Fortunately, there's several areas of the land that were never planted, and actually there were some areas that were planted with nice trees, with native trees, but not much, not enough. We've taken about a hectare and we've fenced it off against the deer, because the deer, I'm afraid, would eat anything that we planted. There's a lot of deer up there. It's pretty remote, and we've had some advice from the Bumblebee Trust as to what sort of flowering plants to put in there which will support the local bumblebees. Now, Scotland has a lot of bumblebees. Bumblebees are big, hairy, bumbly insects, and they exist pretty much into the Arctic Circle. They don't mind the Scottish weather. What they don't like is insecticides and agriculture. Well, there isn't any agriculture up there. There's the conifers, but there's no people don't grow crops. So there isn't the pesticide problem. The problem is loss of habitat. So instead of having nice woods with an understory of rowan and hawthorn and foxgloves and things that produce bee food, there's heather. But heather has a brief flowering period, and the rest of the time there's nothing for bumblebees to eat. So what we have always planned to do is to create an area which is covered with flowering plants that will produce bee food from spring through to autumn.
So welcome to Mountain View, our second reserve. The trees you see in front of me here are one of our first big projects here at Mountain View, a much newer reserve, not as established as Glencoe Wood down at Durer. This is a nature hedge, which is just what it says. Specially selected trees which will grow into a really big thick hedge for wildlife. So everything you see here either flowers or has berries or both. We bought 2,805 trees, and we've enlisted the amazing help of DHL, the courier company, and over 4 days they've supplied a whole range of assorted volunteers to plant the hedge. So all we did first of all was we brought Stanley in with the digger, flipped over the soil so as the young trees have no competition with the grasses and the weeds, and then we plant the pods, a little bit of compost around them just to give them a good start, and in no time at all this will be a thick impenetrable hedge. The other plus of a hedge is this can go. We don't really like fences because it's a nature reserve, but the area in the middle will be planted out once this is established with just a mass of wildflowers for bees. So once this is established, we can take the fence down and the flower area is still protected from the deer.
The things that we've done as well as plant trees have been in some ways more satisfying than the tree planting itself. We're just building a hedgehog hospital. Hedgehogs are in tremendous decline. I've only seen a couple wandering around since we got here. When I was a child, you saw hedgehogs everywhere. Admittedly, they were mainly flat on the road, but you just, they were everywhere. You went for a walk in the evening, there were hedgehogs. There aren't anymore.
One of our more recent projects has been caring for injured hedgehogs. In my lifetime, the population has dropped from about 30 million to 1 million, best guess, which is a huge decline for our favourite spiky little friend. So last year we built a special forever home for injured hedgehogs. We built quite a large enclosure behind me here. And we've had 2 or 3 come through that were simply underweight, so couldn't hibernate successfully. So we kind of fatten them up and then release them on the reserve, which has been quite exciting for locals because they've never seen a hedgehog. There are no hedgehogs in Doura. So as we release more and more, and I think it's about 10 so far, hedgehogs are sort of cropping up in the village and people are seeing one in the wild for the first time. Yesterday our partners Hesselhead Animal Welfare Centre visited, so we've 3 new ones in the enclosure and I'm just off to feed them now. The 3 that we've just taken delivery of, one is blind, one only has 3 legs, and one might be partially blind or might just be a little doolally. But we introduced them yesterday and they've been out and about. I've got video clips that I can show you. But it's lovely for visitors just to be able to see them. Obviously normally they are nocturnal, so they shouldn't be out just now. We shouldn't see them. But the blind one tends to come out whenever it likes, so we'll see what we see. There he is. Tucked up and sleeping, just as he should be. So that's new batteries, blank SD card. And we'll just pop it where it's likely to get our little spiky friend coming for his food. Logical step from our forever home for hedgehogs was to have a facility where we could take care of sicker ones, more injured ones, or, as is often the case, very small ones. If a hedgehog is too small, it can't be outdoors and successfully hibernate. It would die over winter. So we've now almost completed our hedgehog hospital, and at the moment we have 3 underweight hedgehogs in here. This young man in here, he joined us at 211 grams and he is now 737 grams. Down south they're released about that weight. Up in the cold highlands here we like them to be about 850 grams before we would successfully release them and expect them to do okay over winter. So 6 years ago, possibly coming on 7, when I started with Highland Titles, we were very much a conservation project. It was all about removing the hideous Sitka spruce and planting native trees. It was about restoring the land. It was about undoing the damage of commercial planting or overgrazing, the farming that was here. But one of the amazing things that's happened over my 6 years is the more work we've done, the more wildlife has returned, and we now have a very satisfying species list that just weren't here before. And there's real high points mixed in there, like red squirrels. There were no red squirrels the first 2 years I was here. We've had an osprey for the last 3 years, which is just incredible. They've never been seen here before. So yeah, it's been a logical change, but I guess for me it was quite a surprising change from our early goals. We're still planting trees, so we're still running with the basics. It's just becoming much more interesting and a much larger, wider project than I think anybody anticipated from the start. And that's all down to the enthusiasm and the little investment that everybody makes with their little piece of land. We've also built a couple of hides, one on each loch, just so as people can sit and watch all the wildlife that we've actually reintroduced to the area. Although I don't think an osprey's a reintroduction, I think that's a first. So we fed the hedgehogs, we fed the cat. Now we'll have a go at feeding the wild brown trout and see if you can catch a couple of jumps on film. On the water. Ready?
About 6 years ago, I suppose, I set up the Highland Titles Charitable Trust for Scotland because we had the odd situation that Highland Titles was owned by me, and that just seemed to be wrong somehow. So I gifted it to the Highland Titles Charitable Trust for Scotland, and when I set the trust up, one of the objectives of the trust was education, and we've been very fortunate that the chap who manages the reserve on a day-to-day basis, Stuart Borland, is a governor of the local high school, Kinlochleven High School. So he's been able to access the local primary schools, the local secondary school. So we've had people help with tree planting, but more than that, they've come and they've done some pond dipping. They have been of tremendous help with our beekeeping.
This is an educational project that we do with the local primary schools. So we start off with plain white hives and we give them to the schools and the children paint them. This particular one is St Bride's Primary School. So the kids paint them. We visit the school in conjunction with Webster Honey from Kinross, and we teach the kids how important bees are. So we use our resources as a teaching facility. We go to the school, we explain everything to them, but the best bit, in the summer, we'll hire buses and we bring the kids up, put them in little mini bee suits, open the hive and let them actually see what goes on in there. Let them taste the honey and just understand how important bees are to their future. We also run a rural skills course with the high school, Kinlochleven High School. So we have a whole educational side, which is brilliant fun, but it's kind of serving a serious purpose.
Almost from the beginning, we started to have lads contact us and say, why don't we get together and have a meal and socialise and get to know each other? After a couple of years of putting people off and thinking, well, that sounds like a lot of trouble, I don't know that we really want to do that, we decided that that's exactly what we would do. And we came to the iconic GLENCOE house, which is the old stately home built by Lord Strathcona. And we had a fantastic time. We had about 60 guests, and we spread it over a couple of days. We had local craftspeople coming in, selling things that had been made in the glen, and we had some presentations to explain what was going on in the nature reserve. And of course we had a banquet.
I'm standing beside plaque 6. We've pretty much filled this area. Each year we put in a plaque to mark our annual gathering, which is in May and is just a star-studded extravaganza of visitors from all over the world who come and spend 3 days of fun and education with us, really. Everything from fast rib rides on the loch to a full Scottish banquet, a pipe band, and interesting talks from invited guests.
I hope that in the fullness of time we'll have gatherings in other countries as well. Obviously, I'm happy to go out and support gatherings in other countries, and yeah, when people come here to GLENCOE, it gives people a chance to see their land, to meet other like-minded people, to experience some Highland hospitality, to eat Highland food, consume a little bit of Scotch whisky, to see Highland culture, and to connect to their roots if they have Scottish roots, or to learn more about Scotland, which is a country that everybody loves.
Next year's already booked, the 12th, the 13th and the 14th of May, and this year has been a huge success. We've swapped things about a bit. We've had a couple of new people. We had Ailey and Mark to entertain us instead of Horo. We had a new piper, we had new dancers, and we had some regulars that we just can't do without, like Billy Reid. The amazing magician. In fact, he's so good we had him twice. He did his usual over dinner talk, but he appeared on day one for a full 1 hour stand-up. it was just stunning. I still cannot work out how he does anything. It's just been an amazing year, so you should book, you should come next year. One of the requests that we hear now and again is, can I camp on my plot? And if you've got a 1 square foot plot, that's quite tricky. And at the end of the day, we're a nature reserve. We're not a campsite. We don't have the facilities that a campsite would have. And then Peter had the brilliant idea of, what about a shepherd's hut? And now we're able to offer people a night in the woods, a night on the reserve, a total detox away from everything else in a traditional shepherd's hut, but on the nature reserve.
Take care of me and my fragile heart. It's yours to keep, but it can break apart. I'll take care of you and all of your hopes. Hold them in my hands while we learn the ropes. Because my love is here to stay. Nothing could chase it away. And you are the keeper I'm needing to keep all my dreams. Keeper of my dreams. Climb up that hill.
I feel that that this is almost like a franchise. If I could be bothered, we would franchise it. You know, we would say, here's a package, go off and do it yourself, because it's such a fantastic idea, and we have been imitated. Unfortunately, we've been imitated occasionally by people who aren't interested in building nature reserves, but are only interested in making a bit of money. And I don't approve of that particularly. You can't stop them. I mean, it was never our idea. It's an idea that's been going around forever. It used to be sold in private eye, in small ads. Now it's sold on the internet. But I think we are the first people to actually invest the money in conservation. So in that respect, I think we are no longer unique, but we were unusual. I think we were the first, and I think people are copying it, and that's all to the good.
So as I look back on my 7 years here, I think I would like to finish with a thank you for all the people who have bought a little plot of land. And hopefully, if you're watching this, you'll be thinking it was money well spent when you see the changes we've made and the wildlife that have returned. And if you haven't got a plot, but you're still watching this, then I would like to think that we've shown you just what your money can do, and maybe at some point in the future you'd like to have a little plot as well. But a thank you to everybody who's helped and who is responsible for everything that you see around us.